I don't want to make it seem like I'm just like dogging people out or anything like that, because that's just not in my, not that it's not in my nature, because if you upset me enough, I can dog people out. But to the point where it just is hurting anyone. That's not my intent. I don't want to feel hurt and I don't want to hurt others.
Yeah.
So I want to start with that. I bring it more so for like awareness. Watch what you say. Like certain things, you don't know where people come from, what their backgrounds are and all of that. So sometimes you have to be a little more, especially when you're dealing with someone that that isn't in your inner circle, that isn't part of who you're used to being around, I noticed that a lot of the girls in smaller towns, it's a small town mentality, so they're not aware of the things that they bring up or how they come off. So I wrote something, like I said.
Yeah.
So I started off by saying, and maybe I should wait until I get on the thing, but I wrote this because, like I said, I didn't want to, I don't know how to explain it. Anyway, I started off by saying that Merriam-Webster's explanation of white supremacy is the social, economic, and political systems that collectively enable white people to maintain power over people of other races, right?
Yeah.
I started off with that. And then I said, I think of this, and there's a lot to unload. And I just recently, in the last 2 years, realized that there is white supremacy in the Derby community. So, for example, when we do community events, it's always comfortable in Caucasian spaces. Like we go out into the community and it's usually Westport, which is not a place you'll find many Black or Hispanic groups.
Yeah.
And then when you talk about how certain things affect you, it's usually met with, well, how does a whole feel? But since a whole for people like me is only really a few, because the community is made of mainly Caucasians, you feel like shot down, Like you brought this up and you're like, they can't relate to it. So how can they help me? Like, how can they, even see themselves doing anything like this, You
don't speak up because the league is mainly Caucasians, and you feel like, when they say, well, what does the masses think? You're not part of the masses, really. So,
yeah.
The national anthem was another thing that I thought, there was a big issue about the national anthem and whether or not we were going to keep it in our timeline of the events or whatever. And we discussed not keeping it in the timeline, like just not saying anything and just not doing it, right?
Yep.
Well, a couple of games roll by and they're back at doing the national anthem again, and no one even discussed it with me. And that was like a slap in the face in my opinion, because I'm like, we had this whole conversation. Of course, I didn't say anything either, so that kind of like,
yeah,
made me feel like, why would you not at least go and say, Addie, we decided we're going to bring it back or something, or I don't know what I was thinking. It wasn't going to sit right with me either way, so it didn't matter, really.
Yeah. And that was when you were in a leadership role.
Yeah, I was in the ownership.
Yep.
So that kind of bothered me. And again, they didn't know any better. That's crazy. I need to stop doing that.
Yeah.
I did it here too. I said, don't bring it up as a blame game as to why there aren't many in our community. I bring it up to make people aware it's time we get uncomfortable and change.
Yeah.
And we need to get uncomfortable and really change. Even with myself, this is uncomfortable big time for me. This is not something I see, because I feel like, I even told Foxy, I sent her a message after I did our interview, and I said, I feel like I'm going to get backlash.
Yeah.
I'm going to get backlash because people love people. You know what I mean? There's certain people that people love, and and maybe they'll feel attacked or whatever. And I really don't want them to feel that way. But at the same time, I gotta these are my experiences, and I can't not if we're going to change something, somebody's got to say something, right?
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you too, Addie. I think one of the things I had that same fear, like, there's this sport that I love that I played for so many years, and I don't want to be the person to rock the boat until I started hearing people speak up. And then I was like, oh, so we kind of use this analogy sometimes at home about how if you want a pearl, it starts with a little bit of irritation in an oyster's mouth or in an oyster's opening. In order to get that thing of beauty, there has to be some friction and some rubbing and some things that make it uncomfortable. And then that's where the pearl comes in. To get to that beauty, you have to make some sort of discomfort happen. And so I decided I couldn't sit back and not say anything. I mean, talking to Foxy, I apologized to her because I was like, I saw it happening to you and I didn't say anything. And I think that's what hurts people the most is like, it was happening right in front of your eyes and you never said anything.
Right.
And I think something you said earlier too, when you were like, well, maybe they didn't know. Right. But there's a lot of things that I haven't known that I've had to go and research because it makes you understand. Like, I remember when I started grad school, my professor was like, you shouldn't know everything because, you wouldn't be here if you knew everything in the world.
Yeah.
And like none of us in life were born with all of the knowledge we need to make us successful human beings. Just because people don't know something doesn't mean that they're a bad person.
Right.
But they still have to be able to challenge their own perceptions, I think, and really start to understand what other people are going through. I think we need more empathy in this world.
True.
So, yeah.
I agree with that statement.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that this will, people can hear it and maybe if they feel some sort of like, ouch, well, maybe they needed to. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't want to be mean about it, but maybe
I don't either. I don't. And I get what you're saying. I mean, it is what it is. You got to say, you got to put it, it's got to get put out there. It just does. It just does. Yeah. Because, I mean, you can't change if you don't know what to change. So there's that.
You told me your real name and then said, well, it became Addie because, so-and-so couldn't pronounce it. I remember this again, going back to grad school, I'm not trying to make it be like when I was in grad school, but one of the things that we really talked a lot about, especially when they were talking about being a teacher, if I were to go on to be a professor of some kind, they really talked about why it's important to be able to pronounce people's names. And part of it is because there needs to be some equity. I mean, we all can say Karen.
Yes.
Yeah, we all know to say Karen these days. So
that's not an issue for anyone.
Right? And white names are I mean, easy, but why? Because we live in a white culture. Mm-hmm. It's disappointing to me when I do see people that can't pronounce each other's names or they don't care to. And so, I would love to put your real name and I can also put Addie in there. So you might have to spell it for me, but
okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
Like I said, I didn't bring it up. I fell in love with Derby, but I put my sense of God before entering those doors. I'm a brutally honest person, but if I get honest with myself, I sometimes speak on honesty about things to individuals, but don't attack the real hard issues. And then people start to look at me with discomfort. I dumb down. And that's so true. Like people will I'll say something and I'll get and I'm like, really? Let me rephrase that or let me change that. Because obviously I'm going, So yeah. For instance, there's several players in the community who outwardly have shown their disdain for me. Like you can tell, like certain people look at you a certain way or even dismiss you, you feel dismissed.
Yeah.
Or they'll say things like, well, that's ghetto. And then what does it mean to be ghetto according to Webster? I said, I wanted to do it this way because I think if I did it this way, people would understand where I'm coming from,
Yeah.
So according to Webster, the explanation is often shamed and seen as ugly, ghetto, or unprofessional when on Black people, but suddenly become desirable and attractive when on a white person. So
Hmm.
I may mean the same thing as what so and so is saying, but because my presentation or how I brought it about isn't the same as proper Penny,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's seen as ghetto. And I'm like, well, we meant the same thing,
Yeah.
only the way I presented it might not have been as proper. So I don't know.
I think the interesting thing about that too, I mean, so it sounds like you do a little bit of acting.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had to. Yeah, I've had to. Yeah, I've had, especially moving here. Like, I've had to, like, just not say anything or shake my head yes and keep it pushing so I don't challenge something and or get here's the problem. Okay, I am a speck in a sea of whiteness. Like, I'm the Hispanic speck in a sea of whiteness.
Hmm.
And they all have been raised a certain way. They all know life in a certain light. And so my perspective is different because I don't come from that same place.
Yep.
So I've had to adjust a lot here because where I'm from, you just spit it out. If something, you just spit it out, go ahead. I've had to take, trust me, I've had to tame this personality a lot in order to be able to even be there, survive, especially like my ex-husband's family or, that sort of thing. I just had to, like, let me tell, and mind you, I still can't all the way because I am who I am, but
Hmm.
I think had I not done that, I probably wouldn't have been able to make it here. It would have been bad.